Hello, I am Jake, and in this video, we are going to continue creating our program in Python that will run other Python programs. If you've missed the last couple of videos on this, the first video, we created a config file parser, which was pretty awesome. If you want to check that out, it's just up here. And in the video after that, we created a class called runner, which basically allows us to actually execute another Python file from this Python file and pass it inputs and stuff like that. So I'm going to go over them really quickly. So if you don't want to watch them, that's okay. But if you do, that second one is also right up here. And yeah, I mean, you can just go watch them. It helps out if you want. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. But in this video, we are going to merge the runner and the config file together. So we use the config, we save to the config, and we basically just run from the config. This means it's a lot easier and a lot more extensible. So if we want to add new files, we can really easily, and it even saves it. It's like we have our own little database. So let's do that. But first, I'm going to go over really quickly what we have. So first off, we have a class runner. We can initialize it. It has a threads dictionary and an applications array or list. When we do a start process, we take the index of the program, which it gets from applications, and some potential inputs. We then create these arguments and append the inputs to the end of the arguments. And then finally, we set the self-threads file to the subprocess.popen. This is basically opening a new process and running it with the given arguments. And the arguments are actually literally like Python 3 and then the file name, so like main, and then like test. So this is argument 0, which is this one here. Argument 1 is the file name, which is, well, in this case, main.py, and then test, which is whatever the input is. So just so you know, that's kind of what I'm talking about there. Then we're just piping the standard out and standard error to our current process, and we're setting that piped data should be in text format. That's the most complicated part of this. Then we are also allowing us to list all of our applications. So it will print that there are some applications, and it will just go through our applications here and print out a count. And then finally, we can add applications. So we then have our runner class that we instantiate, and then we have some user input, which the user can then either choose L to call list applications. We can choose A to add an application, or we can choose, it looks like I got rid of my add application stuff, but that's okay because we're going to change that anyways. And then R, which allows you to run an application. And finally, you can press Q to quit, or you can just Control C, like, any other script. So that's this file, and we're going to go over the config file. This is basically, it has a data class of an application where it has a name, input type, and path. And within here, we initialize it. Technically, this is overkill because we support 3 different types of files here, but we're just going to do YAML. So basically it loads the YAML file by reading it to the self.config, and then we then call parse configs, which we then basically populate this applications list with all of the configs from it. And then finally, we have this update config, which will allow us to write it back to our config file. And that's basically it. That's the whole thing. So let's get to it. So first things first, let's start using our config file. So luckily, because we've already built it and it's already a class, that's super easy to do. All we have to do is just say from config, because it's in the same file or folder as the main file. We just say from config, import config. And then when we initialize this, we're actually going to get rid of applications here, and we're just going to say config equals config. And target file is, we are just going to say config. Actually, I don't know if I need that. I somehow ran Python. Config.yaml. And then we're going to say is YAML true. Again, if I were to write this from scratch, probably wouldn't include the YAMLs, or like this is YAML stuff. I just use one. I pick one, but we're just going to use what we have here. All right, so once we have done that, we also need to parse the config. So we say self.config.parseConfigs, and that's going to call this here, where it's going to populate its list of applications. All right, so now we have basically the list of possible applications. So let's go ahead and just change this to config.applications. And then let's also change this to config.applications. And then let's change this from app to app.name. Because the list of applications here, which is in the, I don't know why it didn't jump to there, but anyways, it's here. An application is this, and it has a name. So if we go ahead and do that, we can also say add applications, but we're just going to kind of not do anything for this, and we're just going to kind of ignore it for now. Awesome. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we actually get any kind of, or if we say we support anything. So based off of our YAML, we have this here, which is a convert web PNG to, or WebP to PNG, and it points to the path to that there. And if we go ahead and press L, we can see that we have one application we support. And we didn't have to add anything because it just read from the file. Awesome. Okay, so things are working. So we can go ahead and clear that terminal and keep going. I'm going to move this down a little bit. I can never remember how large I have this thing after I test stuff myself, but oh well. Hopefully it's okay still for you to watch. All right, cool. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to change it from being start process to run program. So we're going to do run program, and we're going to say self, and then we're going to take the program index. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we have inputs that we want. And we actually want to make this a little bit nicer to, well, use. So the reason that it's not particularly nice now is because it just expects you to do like R, some number, and then the input, right? Or the list of inputs. I guess we technically just support one right now, but it wouldn't be too hard to support multiple. So what we're going to do now is do application equals self dot, actually, no, let's call this run application. That seems nicer. Dot config dot application, applications. And then we're going to do program index. Then we're going to get the user input, like what is the input type? And that's going to be equal to the application dot input type. And that is just this here. And then we're going to throw in some if statements to actually get what the user's input is. So I'm just going to copy over some of that right here and put this here. And we're going to say the user input is equal to nothing. And we're going to say if it's file, we're going to say that it is now equal to whatever the user wants to enter, and then enter a string or enter a number. So we're going to support a few different types. Then we're going to do return start process, self, because this is a class, dot start process, application dot path, because we need the path to the file we want to run. And then we're going to pass in the list of inputs, which in this case is just one thing. And there we go. So now when we get to here, we need to change a couple of things, because right now it's expecting this program index, but really what we want is the path. So the path to the file. What we're going to do then is get rid of this because we don't need that. We can change this to, actually, no, let's just call this program or application, I guess. We've been calling things application. We've kind of been using like 5 different names, haven't we? Not great, whatever. And there we go. Now we support running an application using this new method, but we need to change how we actually execute this. So before we had the program index, and then we took in the inputs. But instead, we're going to forget about the inputs and just not call start process, but instead call run application. And there we go. Now this should work. So let's go ahead and delete this alpha tester PNG. And let's go ahead and get the path to this, which is this. I don't know if it will work if I have backslashes, so we're going to do that. And then we're going to run this thing. All right, so we will list our applications. We see we have 0. We will then do R and 0, which will then run start or run application. And then it's going to say, please enter a file. If we go ahead and enter this file and we click or press enter, we should see a new alpha tester value pop up here as a PNG. And there we go. We see it happening. Perfect. So we can now run whatever kind of things we have from this. And if we quit the file and run it again, we can still use that script because it's kind of memorized by the config that we have. Awesome. Well, some of the other things we have here we don't yet support, like add an application. So let's do that next. Because we actually have another application here called make transparent, which will turn a image that has white in it into an image. Well, it basically turns the white of the image into a transparent alpha version of that. That was a very bad description. It makes all the white transparent in an image. That's the better way to say that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's actually make this not take any inputs when we call add application, which is kind of what we have here. So let's actually, I'm going to copy in some stuff because I don't want to write all this again. And we're going to go ahead and just paste this in. It's just a bunch of like, what do you want to call this? So here we go. So we're first going to say, what is the name of the application you would like to add? Then what is the path to the application's Python file? And then what is the input type that you would expect the user to use? So string, file, number. Then we're going to print a line just to keep things a bit separate. And then we're going to say that we're going to be adding this name with this path with the input type. And then we're going to say enter yes if this is correct. Otherwise, you can enter something and it just will like not do it because maybe you messed it up. And if that's the case, then all we're going to do is call add application on our config, which is again why it's really handy to have classes for things, because we then call add application, which will basically do what we already support, which is adding this application to this list of applications within our config class. That was a long sentence. And then it's going to call update config on that, which actually updates the config YAML file. So that means when we add an application here, it's adding it for real. Like it's completely adding it for good. It's really cool. So let's go ahead and do that. So the application we're going to add next is this make transparent. Let's go ahead and copy the path for that, just so we can kind of like show that it's going to work. We'll do that and do that. And we are going to call, eventually, we're going to add it. We're going to list it. We're going to run it. And then we're going to quit. And then we're going to run it again and see if it's still in the list, which it should be because you'll see. But we're going to run make transparent on happy face, which will remove all of the white from the happy face. So it should make it so it doesn't do a perfect job because it's like, there's like no margin for error. It's either white or not white. So like slightly off white is still kept, but that's okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this now. And if we do A to add an application, it's going to say, what would you like to call it application? So let's call this make white transparent. Cool. We will add the path to the file. So that's this here. And then we're going to say it takes in a file. To be honest, this doesn't really matter that much because we just take them all as strings and pass them anyways. But we could kind of get smarter, and eventually we will get smarter in the next video where we start to incorporate this with some kind of UI, where we can make it so that, if it's expecting a number, we show a number picker. Or if it's expecting a string, we show a text box or something like that. And then in this case, for a file, we can actually show a file picker. So, you don't have to just enter in the path to the file. You can just, browse and find the file you want. Much nicer. So we're going to say it's a file here. Okay, so if this is correct, enter yes. So before I click enter here, we're going to go over to config YAML. And when I press yes here, or when I press enter, it should update the applications within our config and then save to our config YAML. Ta-da! Magic. So we now have this make white transparent, but because we've done that, not because we've updated this config YAML, but because we've added to that applications list, if I press L now, we can see that we actually have two applications we support, the one we just added. So now, if I go ahead and get a link to this, not rename, copy path, and we change all these because, again, I don't really know if it works with the backslashes, but whatever. And we go ahead and do R1, enter the file, we enter this in, and, well, we should see this temp file get created, and now we have this transparent happy face. Awesome. But the best part of this is because it's linked to the configs, this config YAML, which we have now updated through running this application, when we quit and we restart and we list, it's still there. So this means that the more we add to this application, it's always going to be there. We don't have to add things every time we want to restart the program. It's saving what we had. So this is like a prime example of how you actually make a program. A lot of people tend to have an idea for something they want to make, and they are not able to kind of break it down into small little steps. And that's something, if you want me to make a video on that, please drop a comment down below, because I think it would be cool, but if no one's going to watch it, then like, eh. But it's such an important part of being a programmer or, problem solving. Being able to break down your project, something you want to make, into a smaller, more tangible, or I guess smaller and more tangible tasks. Tangible is a big word, I guess. It's hard for me to even say. But doing that allows you to make these small steps and feel like you're actually getting somewhere, right? If you just say that like, oh, I want to make this app that's going to rival like Instagram, that's a lot. You have to do a lot of things in order to do that. But, where do you start? There's so many places you can start. But because there's so many places, so many people just look at that and just say like, no, I can't do that. That's too hard. But it's actually not, I mean, maybe get to the level of Instagram, sure, maybe that's kind of hard. But, actually making something is not always that hard. You just need to figure out how to break it down. So in this case, we made our config first. How can we interface with different types of configs? Then we said, okay, well, how can you run a file? And now we're saying, how can we merge our configs with some kind of running, with the class we made to run our applications? And next we're going to say, how can I make my running class work with some kind of UI, right? Those are some simple ways we can break down this. So let's add some other stuff here. One thing I think that's kind of very simple is just to be able to delete an application. So let's do delete application. It's going to take in an index. And we're going to go ahead and just say delete self.config.applications program index. And then we're going to say self.config.updateConfig. I guess we can add in a check here. So let's actually add name equals self.config.applications program index dot name. And then we will say confirm equals input F. I wish everything was just already an F string. That'd be so nice. Are you sure you want to delete name? Yes or no, right? And then if confirm equals yes, then we will go ahead and do these things. All right, pretty simple, but let's see if it works. So we can see we can run our applications. We have 2 here. If we go ahead, oh, we haven't added this in, my bad. Let's go ahead and add that in real quick. It should just be a second. We can just do delete and selection, delete program. We're basically going to do the exact same thing here, but say if it starts with a D, and we're going to do delete, delete. Was I spelling delete wrong? Oh well. All right, here we go. So we can do L, we can do D0 or D1. And it says, are you sure you want to delete make white transparent? If we enter in yes, and before we press enter, we can now see that. We can run L again, quit, run L again, ta-da. So now we have added a way where we can add new applications, we can remove applications, and the applications that we add and remove are now saved. So yeah, pretty awesome. I just realized that at some point during the recording of this video that my video feed really thought that the coat hanger I have behind me is a person and decided to focus on that instead of my face. So if my camera feed dropped off at some point, that's probably why, unless it doesn't look so terrible, but it probably does. But that is all for this video. Please give it some love and consider subscribing because it helps out the channel. But honestly, liking and commenting is probably the most helpful stuff. So please just drop a comment because engagement is super useful. So thank you. Yeah, and that's all for this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.